Anyway, as I was saying, dinosaurs died out millions of years ago, and we have their hardest rock fossils to prove it.
What a terrible way to teach this lesson. Fossils don't exist in a vacuum, and there's plenty of variability in how they form, so calling them proof of an old Earth without any context is just going to confuse your class. You need to explain how these fossils form and how we date them and the materials around them. You can't just say, these are fossils, so we know that fossils are old.
Did you know that there are over 120 scientific publications that show that biomaterials are still in ancient bones? 50 publications for dinosaurs specifically.
But these bones are solid rock.
Look, don't make me agree with Paul here, dude. He is so very wrong, but the reason for his ignorance is starting to become apparent. In the last episode, we started a new series within a series by taking on the Genesis Apologetics classroom videos. And this time, we're gonna keep doing that, with several more videos from the same series in the order that they were posted, which is clearly not the order that they were meant to be watched or maybe even filmed. So as always, thanks to my patrons on Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube. If you want to join one of those prestigious groups, you can do so at patreon.com/ValkaiLabs or using the join button down below this video. And now, let's talk about tissues.
But these bones are solid rock.
Some are, but many aren't. Here, check this out. Many dinosaur bones still have blood cells and vessels, hemoglobin, bone cells, histones, skin pigments, and collagen.
They even found cartilage and nerve cells in some dinosaur bones. How could they last for millions of years? The evidence points to dinosaur bones being buried recently, and that fits with a biblical flood.
No, it absolutely does not, Jessica. Your teacher should have already explained how soft tissues can be preserved and where you got that sick vintage Ninja Turtles cup. I can't help with that one, but I can talk about soft tissues, so let's get into it. Soft tissues in fossils were a major discovery in modern biology, but they are not the anti-evolution bombshell that creationists like to pretend they are. To understand what I mean by that, let's lay out some of the possible hypotheses for these and see which one the evidence actually supports. First hypothesis is the one that creationists like the most, that the Earth and all the fossils in it are much younger than we thought. But if geology, nuclear physics, chemistry, and the entire fossil fuel industry are functional, and they are, then the radiometric dating methods which those fields use to operate can be considered reliable, and those dating methods certainly don't point to a young Earth. Hypothesis number 2 would be that the Earth is old, but that the fossils are young, and there are a couple of problems with that as well. First of all, there are several forms of radiometric dating, each of which covers its own time span. So, for example, carbon dating only goes back about as far as 50,000 years, whereas there are other forms of radiometric dating which go back millions or even billions of years. So when we're talking about dating fossils, we're often talking about using multiple overlapping dating methods on the rocks around them. That way we're not using the fossils to date the rocks and the rocks to date the fossils. That would be silly. Now, a quick sidebar here. There are certain fossils called index fossils, which have a known age, so we can use them as sort of a shortcut for dating. We know how old that thing is, and this thing was found right next to it, so we now know roundabout how old this thing is as well. But that's what's called a relative dating method, meaning that it's relative to other things. Other examples of relative dating methods include things like fluorine dating or paleomagnetism. Radiometric dating, on the other hand, is what's called an absolute dating method, meaning that it can be used on its own to tell the age of a material. Other absolute dating methods include things like electron spin resonance dating or fission track dating, and just to be safe, scientists will often use more than one of those at the same time to see where the dates overlap and be extra sure about their measurements. So now to bring this all back, because we're using all of these dating methods to test the age of fossils and the rocks they're buried in and a lot of other things all around the world as well, the idea of uniquely young fossils in an otherwise old Earth doesn't really hold any water. A third hypothesis was that these fossils were contaminated with microorganisms, and the things that we thought were soft tissues were actually just bacterial biofilms. In fact, that was a hotly debated idea when this discovery first came out, but then that was ruled out by paleohistological analysis. That's paleo meaning ancient and histology meaning the study of tissues. Long story short, this hypothesis didn't really work out either. So we know the Earth is old, and we know that the fossils are old, and we know that the tissues present are original to the fossils, but none of this actually answers the fundamental question of how these few scraps of cells and tissues can possibly last for millions and millions of years. For that, we need a fourth hypothesis, that there was something, some natural cause that allowed for this remarkable preservation. And it has to be something logical, and it can't be anything too extraordinary, considering the fact that we've seen this sort of thing happen several times now. And to start thinking about what that mechanism might be, let's talk about how we preserve tissues for at least a few hundred or maybe even a few thousand years, a process called cross-linking. Cross-linking is a blanket term for a diverse array of chemical reactions which all ultimately result in the same thing: proteins and other cellular components denaturing, which is to say unraveling, and then getting all tangled back up together into dense wads that have a very difficult time decaying. For example, tanning leather and preserving wet specimens in formaldehyde both work by cross-linking tissues through totally different processes. So hypothesis number 4 would be that something happened inside these bones somewhere between death and fossilization that cross-linked these scraps of cells and tissues and slowed their rates of decay. For that to be true, there would need to be some cross-linking agent that is readily available in these animals' bodies. We would need to know that it can cause cross-linking and preservation to happen in this way, and we'd want at least one good experiment showing that it's effective. And it just so happens we have all of those things. First, our cross-linking agent. It's just iron. It flows through every blood vessel in your body in the form of hemoglobin, and we know it's present in the tissues being preserved here because the tissues in question are things like blood vessels and blood cells, both of which are typically associated with blood. Secondly, we know that iron can cause cross-linking because free iron in the body is a clinically significant problem. It causes cross-linking in tissues that can be extremely harmful. In fact, when we look at the soft tissues in these dinosaur bones, we find iron crystals, the kind that you would never get in living tissue. And third, just to be extra sure, we have that ever important experimental evidence. In a landmark experiment in this case, a few blood vessels were extracted from ostrich bones and soaked in either water or an iron-rich hemoglobin solution. After just 3 days, the blood vessels soaked in water had decayed into an unrecognizable mush, but the ones soaked in hemoglobin showed no signs of decay after 2 whole years. And so that's the idea. When the dinosaur died, its red blood cells broke down and the iron they contain cross-linked and preserved some of its tissues. Those preserved inside of a fossilized bone were doubly protected from the elements, and so we can still find a few cells and tiny scraps of tissues and collagen and whatever after all these millions of years. All of which is logical, proven to be possible, and doesn't require any special circumstances which are any more extraordinary than those which allow fossils to form in the first place. What you're seeing in this clip, however, is a pattern in this series. Creationists don't have any positive evidence for creationism, so they just rely on misusing good science to prop up their bad arguments. They point to what they perceive as failures in evolutionary theory to distract from the failures of creationism, and hope that you don't realize what they're offering you is ignorance, not evidence. Even if they could completely debunk evolution in its entirety, that wouldn't automatically prove creationism to be true. They would still have their work cut out for them to provide evidence for a creator, to show that it can create, to show that it did create, and then to find the mechanisms by which it did so. Unfortunately, however, you're about to see a whole bunch of none of that, as Paul and pals hinge their entire argument against the most well-supported and influential theory in the history of biology on the simple and undeniable fact that organs are complicated.
So our ears have evolved so that we can only hear frequencies within the human range.
Can I have 30 seconds to prove that our ears didn't evolve that way?
No. Get a job, Paul.
Be my guest.
Our ears are designed in a very specific way. What they do is they trap sound, send it down the ear canal where it wiggles the eardrum. And behind the eardrum, there's 3 little bones here that vibrate and amplify the sound by 1.6 times. Then they send the sound into the cochlea. So inside of here, it amplifies the sound again by 22 times, and that goes through a little bit of liquid.
This is a really superficial understanding of the ear, and nothing about it disproves evolution as you claimed it would, Paul. We see massive variability in all of these structures across all different animals, and they always benefit them in their specific niches. You know, like you would expect from things that evolved.
And so inside the ear, there's 20,000 little hairs right inside this area that open and close chemical doors that transmit this sound waves into brain signals.
The opening and closing of chemical doors sounds really cool, but it's actually almost identical to the way that all of your nerve cells work. They're just making it sound more fantastical than it really is to try to elicit an emotional reaction.
Oh.
What do you mean, oh? Were you not listening when she taught this to you?
What it does is it goes down a little wire wrapped around a nerve in our brain so that we can interpret it.
That's not how anything works. A wire wrapped around a nerve? What are you even trying to say here? And what are you smiling about, Jessica? That was complete gibberish.
So, My question is, how did time and chance and this random evolution assemble these 5 systems perfectly?
That's literally just the argument from incredulity fallacy. I can't imagine how our ears might have evolved, so they didn't. Remember, at the beginning of this clip, he said that he was going to prove that our ears did not evolve.
Can I have 30 seconds to prove that our ears didn't evolve that way?
And in the end, his proof was just him saying, how could that have evolved?
My question is, how did time and chance and this random evolution assemble these 5 systems perfectly?
Using the obligatory straw man of time and chance and random evolution, of course. So overall, we've got the false dilemma fallacy, supported by the argument from incredulity fallacy, and delivered by way of straw man fallacies. That is their proof that your ears could not have evolved, but were actually handcrafted by some guy. Color me unconvinced. Hey, down here. Hey, it's me, Forrest. I'm inside the ear, and I'm here. And I'm here to tell you about Brilliant. Brilliant is an awesome educational app for people who want to learn real math and science. The reason I love it is because it engages your whole brain with step-by-step interactive lessons and personalized practice that you can tackle at your own pace. It's so much more effective than just sitting through boring lectures, and the fact that it's so fun makes it more likely that you might explore fields of study that you wouldn't have had the interest or even the courage to try before. And that's why I'm here in this ear, to make sure that you can hear me tell you that you can try everything Brilliant has to offer absolutely free for a full 30 days and get 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant Premium. And all you got to do to get it is go to brilliant.org/ForrestValkai, click the link in the description, or scan the QR code on the screen. Brilliant has thousands of courses in math, science, programming, and more. And they're all designed by a team of world-class teachers from places like MIT, Harvard, and Stanford. As for me, I always recommend that people start with their scientific thinking course to learn a little bit about the intricacies of the world around you before moving on to something that really stretches your brain. So get started today by going to brilliant.org/ForrestValkai, clicking the link in the description, or scanning the QR code on the screen. Remember, you get to try everything Brilliant has to offer absolutely free for a full 30 days and get 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant Premium when you use my links. Okay, I'm ready to come out of the ear now. Hello? Can someone come get me? The ad's over. I'd like to leave the ear, please. Is this how I die?
My presentation on the eye.
The human eye is one of the greatest all-time achievements of evolution.
Dear Glob, no it is not. Our retinas are backwards, you homeschool dropout. Who gave you a teaching certificate?
What are you saying? Well, I guess I could have mentioned that the eye has over 2 million moving parts, 1 million nerves connected to the brain, and over 100 million light-sensitive cells.
This is a study from all the way back in 1994, which narrowed the evolution of a complex image-forming eye from a flat patch of light-sensitive cells down to 1,829 tiny improvements, which the researchers argued could have taken place in about 364,000 generations, or just a few 100,000 years. Considering that the oldest eyes in the fossil record are about 550 million years old, this provides enough time for complex image-forming eyes to evolve from scratch over and over more than 1,500 times. Not to mention the fact that we literally see every logical step from a simple light-sensitive patch to a complex image-forming eye in living organisms all around us today. Complex does not mean impossible, and your inability to understand science is not an argument against it.
If the eyes were a digital camera, they would have over 576 megapixels. That's over 20 times better than this.
You see that face? That's the face you make when you need to wear glasses to see the presentation about how our eyes are proof of intelligent design.
The eyes have 100 million light-sensitive cells
You already said that.
and can see a single lit candle almost 2 miles away.
Yeah, that's what light-sensitive cells do.
2 eyes give us depth perception, and each eye has 6 muscles attached so we can track objects without having to move our heads. And these 12 muscles coordinate perfectly so we don't go cross-eyed.
Young man, I love how excited you are about this topic. Please use that enthusiasm to study up on the diversity of eyes across the animal kingdom and photosensitive cells in other kingdoms as well, and how these things are related and how they evolve, because there's actually a ton of literature about this stuff. And if you're this blown away by the intricacies of eyes now, you're going to lose your mind when you see all the different ways that they have been over the past 500 million years. But in order to get there, you gotta quit taking your arguments from a 33-year-old man who's retaking high school for the 21st time.
And you want us all to believe that all of this just came about by chance.
No, Paul! Quit corrupting the youth and go home to your family.
Guess how many candies are in the jar, and it's yours.
Well, now who is this girl?
500 million. Wow, you get it right every time.
500 million. How do you know? Did you even count?
No need, she's always right.
Okay, well, now that Susie's done with our little Geology Club fundraiser, I want to get back to radiometric dating, which proves the Earth is over 4 billion years old.
Oh my glob, that tie-in was so bad it's gonna summon Paul.
Aren't radiometric ages tied with unprovable assumptions?
Well, I have over 500 geology books, and they all support these ancient ages.
Okay, so how often are they accurate with the ages of known rocks?
What?
It's that awful ICR study, Kathy. How'd you not see this coming?
For instance, when radiometric dating is used on known rocks, like volcanoes, it's always wrong, often by millions of years.
What are you saying?
Well, if it's wrong on the ages of known rocks, why would we trust it with unknown rocks? It'd be like Abby here, guessing that there's 500 million pieces of candy in that jar. It's probably way off. No offense.
So what Paul is wronging about here is yet another frequent topic on this channel. That one time the Institute for Creation Research did radiometric dating incorrectly back in 1992 and hasn't shut up about it since. I covered this claim in my Galapagos video and in my last video about Eric Hovind, but the long and short here is that creationist scientists from the Institute for Creation Research used potassium-argon dating to test the age of a rock that had formed exactly 6 years ago during an eruption at Mount St. Helens. The problem is, not every kind of radiometric dating is useful for every type of substance or every age of substance. As I mentioned earlier, different radioisotopes decay at different rates, and potassium-40, which is what they use for their study, has a half-life of about 1.2 billion years. So using that to measure something that's 6 years old is like measuring the width of a human hair in football fields. So once again, the writers are throwing around the term study as if that means that it's authoritative and automatically proves them right. But they're not letting you know who did that study, which would certainly influence your view of it, or talking about the overwhelming amount of other studies that prove them wrong. Or at the very least, just acknowledging the irony of the fact that they keep pointing to scientific studies in order to tell you that you can't trust science.
Science proves evolution. Case closed. No questions.
What a super cool way to teach a class.
Excuse me, but you haven't done anything to prove that science actually supports evolution. Real science, that is.
Again, I hate this teacher for making me agree with Paul, but literally his entire pedagogy over all of these videos has been shutting down his class's curiosity, inappropriately critiquing the Bible, and repeating the words hard as rock over and over.
Real science? As if I don't understand real science?
I don't think you do.
Well, all the things that we've been discussing have been through the lens of historical science, which is based on our worldview lens to interpret them. Fossils, guesses about which transitional forms gap between creatures. All these ideas rely on historical science, not real science. Real science is able to observe, test, and repeat to find conclusions.
So Paul is now engaging in the classic Answers in Genesis argument of distinguishing between historical and observational, or in this case, real science. Essentially, real science is things that you can observe in their entirety from start to finish, and anything that requires you to rely on evidence because you can't witness the entire event is essentially just a matter of faith and worldview. Which of course means that every criminal trial, every history book, the orbit of Pluto, and the question of whether or not Paul is actually related to his own grandparents are all open to religious interpretation. After all, we don't have a 4K video of every single crime. Historical documents are largely just non-repeatable personal testimonies. We've known that Pluto exists for less time than it takes for it to go all the way around the sun, and none of us have ever watched the complete lives of Paul's grandparents to witness them producing his parents who in turn produced him. So really, there's no reason to believe that any of it actually happened. It could just be magic. And if you think that perhaps I'm being a bit hyperbolic or unfair when I say that they say that all historical science is just based on faith, let's run this video side by side with the next video where they say all the same things and also literally say that historical science is all based on faith.
You say evolution is based on scientific facts, but
you haven't done anything to prove that science actually supports evolution.
they take unrelated animals and fit them next to each other to talk about how they evolved from one another.
Guesses about which transitional forms gap between creatures. All these ideas rely on historical science, not real science. That's historical science, not observational science. Historical science, which is based on our worldview lens to interpret them. Historical science is like piecing together a puzzle, but in the end, you may not get the right picture. Real science uses observation, testing, and repetition. Real science is able to observe, test, and repeat to find conclusions. That's how we got people on the moon. You can't do that in the past. That's how we brought people to the moon. That's how we make new medicines. Historical science can't do that.
Number one, so-called historical science plays a major part in both of those things. Number two, where's your observational science of a talking donkey or people being made from mud? Number three, while we're talking about medicine, you might want to check on your camera guy because I think he just had a stroke. And number four, does that kid's laptop just say binge Jesus?
So, since both creation and evolution are based on the past, they're both ideas that are built upon faith. And I think that it takes a lot less faith to believe in a well-designed universe by an intelligent creator.
In fact, it takes a lot more faith to believe in evolution than it does to believe in the creator God of the Bible.
They don't pay me enough for this.
Hank, you'll take the $12 you're being paid for this shoot and you'll like it. I think that's about all we have time for today. These videos only get worse as they go along, and there are still so many of them left, but I hope that the knowledge that these folks literally think that anything you can't see with your own eyes is just a matter of faith helps you remember just how vapid and boring their perspectives on science really are. In the meantime, don't forget to sign up for my upcoming trip to Costa Rica and to check out the events page on my website to see where you can find me out in the wild. And with that, I'm Forrest Valkai. Thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, and all the other stuff you do here on YouTube. Please exit through the gift shop, pick up one of these sweet t-shirts. Have an awesome rest of your day, and never stop learning. Bye-bye.
Real science is able to observe, test, and repeat to find conclusions. That's how we brought people to the moon.